I love. Hello, everybody. Hello. Oh, yeah, I'm on. Hello, everybody. Thank you for waiting for us. Welcome to Grand Designs Live. We'll go straight into it because we're a little late. We're going to be talking about future-proofing your home. Yeah?
Yeah.
For yourself and against the environment, I'm guessing, but we can get into that later.
We can.
Yeah.
Exactly.
First off, why don't we do some introductions? We'll start here.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jalil. I'm the founder of Resetters Architects. We focus on well-being by design. Our motto is to enable well-being by design, one house, one street, one neighborhood at a time.
Very good. Me next.
Karen, please.
So I'm Karen Fardell. I am founding director of Future Proof My Home, and we're all about making homes easy to use for every life stage and for all ages.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin. Tonight, Matthew. I am in my mid-60s, and I'm very interested in future-proofing the rest of my life, which I want to be as long as possible. So I have a very personal stake in this. Actually, I think it's a for those of us who are not so young, it's a
Why are you
really
looking at me
For all
when you said
ages,
that?
Kevin.
you're young. You've got 15 years on me. And I just think it's a hugely important thing. And it's something that actually, in my experience, when we film people building their homes, so often it's not their consideration. People tend to want to make the world in their imagination. They want to make it in their image.
Yeah.
And it's almost they want to make it to be almost like a perfect version of who they are in order that they hope it will
Thanks to you.
make them somehow perfect. And most people have a great difficulty in terms of anticipating what their needs are going to be in 10 or 15 or 20 years' time.
Yeah.
So, and I think if you're self-building or if you're planning to stay in a building, it's a very, very important thing to be able to try and plan, project, discuss, actually, create worse scenarios. Imagine you love your building and home, and you find out that in 10 years' time you can't live there because there's no wheelchair access or disability access. So for me, it's a really fascinating area. Sorry, Lucy.
That's all right. I'm Lucy Roberts. I'm an architect and I'm here with Hercule Huts. I design the Shepherd's Huts and we're over on stand H50, but I also have an architecture practice. So yeah, do a bit of both.
Wonderful. So Karen, I'm going to leave it over to you. I mean, how would you like to start this? I mean, maybe maybe just explain what you actually mean by future-proofing your home.
Okay, so it can include some people think of it as smart technology. Some people think of it as sustainable design, making your home more energy efficient. And some people are thinking about it in terms of future-proofing for different life stages. I talk about it from all three perspectives. And the reason I do is because I started my career in self-build PR. And in 2011, I had a brain hemorrhage and basically was lucky enough to make a full recovery from that. Within 2 years, I then had a baby. So I kept on thinking, actually, it's ridiculous that we kind of think about able-bodied, disabled. We think about, basically, we should have homes that are inclusively designed for all ages and abilities, and we don't because of building regulations and because people just don't think like that until it's too late. And Kevin, you said our homes can radically transform the lives of people who live in them.
So I did.
That can be for the better, and it can be for the worse if you haven't got it future-proofed to your needs as they change over time. So what I wanted to do was to take you back through a build that you followed of Johnny and Cara. So their story basically illustrates what I'm talking about. This is not about waiting until you're older to kind of do it. It's about making sure that your homes can transition. And there are key ways to do that, and that's with thoughtful designers and with thoughtfully designed products. So this couple, they built a home up in Yorkshire. Their story is that basically they went on a family holiday. When they were on the plane, Cara started to feel numb in her legs. And when she got to the other end, she had to be wheelchaired off, and she hasn't walked since. The difficulty with her house and with other houses is that it wasn't future-proofed. So that made life difficult for the next 3 years. And in fact, within that period of time, they then had another baby. So what her ambition was, as you know, Kevin, is that they wanted to make a house that was going to be suitable for her needs. And as she says here, I don't know if you can hear the audio. Can you hear the audio? No, you can't hear the audio.
This
So
had to happen because of my disability.
Yeah.
Cara is one of over 16 million registered disabled people living in the UK. Yet accessible design is often overlooked and will nearly always place function ahead of aesthetics.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine being in a situation whereby either you've had a fall or you've had a sports injury? In my case, it was a brain hemorrhage, and then you're having to start thinking about building a home from scratch. So, in my opinion, all homes should be inclusive. If you're a new parent, you often have to operate with one arm, so you're situationally, disadvantaged. If you have an arm injury or a leg injury, you're disadvantaged because of that temporarily, and then you could be permanently, having difficulties if you have something like has happened to Cara. So that's why I think, and actually, that was her problem. Is that 91% of houses in this country are not accessible, which basically causes big problems, doesn't it?
And I guess it doesn't have to be, people might be thinking, oh, I have to sacrifice kind of beauty and design. It's just about thinking about certain things. So about sizes of doorways. Can other rooms be converted that are downstairs to the living room, to rooms to sleep in or shower in at a later point? You can still have a beautiful home.
What I find most interesting here is that every single design accessible home I've been to where the architecture is considered, it's not retrofitted, it doesn't feel like a hospital or a kind of disabled toilet in a service station. Where it's thought and built in, you end up with things like a shower with a tiled bench in it, or you end up with easy to open doors or sliding doors, or you end up with zero thresholds where you can walk out at a single level from inside to out, for example. And you think, this is actually just a beautiful way to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Every time you find these things, it's like, oh, this is actually just really good plain architecture, full stop. And I think that we have a very different perception. We think of disability design, or we think of future-proofing design as somehow going to a catalogue and bolting onto big lumps of plastic and levers and pull cords and switches into our existing homes. And that is it's a kind of very, that's just shopping for it, basically. Whereas, in fact, you can design it in and make it's something special. I wanted to say one more thing, and that is that when I won't say who it was, but I said to one of the suppliers on this project, have you ever, they were designing a component of the building. I said, have you ever sat in a wheelchair? He said, no. I said, well, how can you design a disability kitchen, or we call it an ability kitchen?
Oh, good.
Right? Because it's about actually empowering people, not disempowering. How can you create and provide all of this stuff unless you know exactly where what it's like to be able to move around, to try and operate a pan or a kettle full of boiling water, or lift a child, into your lap in a room full of changes in level or what have you. And I find that once architects and designers and makers do, they get it. It's that simple. You only need to do it for about half an hour. I once went around a house belonging to a guy who was wheelchair bound and who had an accident. He was a former Olympic swimmer, and I got stuck on a 4mm threshold to his bathroom in one of his wheelchairs. I couldn't get over it.
Well, that's the thing. And the thing is if you're building a house, often the work that goes into the groundworks is very expensive, and you can't see the value in it. But actually, we made that mistake with my mum's house, where basically she knocked down a garage and built a single-story annex. And of course, the builders were all kind of going, well, You don't want to you don't need to do that, because at that point she didn't need to do it from a physical point of view. But that's created problems at a later date. So yeah, simple things like level thresholds, really important. And it costs the NHS an absolute fortune because our houses are not made accessible. And families who, if they've got an older person and an older person has a fall in the house, what that means is that oftentimes, according to Age UK, is it can mean that they can then be forced into long-term care, which costs families £53,000 and up a year.
Yeah.
So
whichever way,
it's
it's costing the government, it's costing local government who provide conversion grants for things like thresholds and ramps and so forth. An absolute fortune. I think is it 15? I think if I remember, it's about £15,000 with the local government.
£1.4 billion a year.
£1.4 billion a year across
as a result of
And Saleem, people if they're designing their home, people might think or not want to think about things like that. We don't really like thinking about ourselves having accidents or being not able to go.
Exactly.
So it's kind of and designing a home is this hopeful thing, and it's as Kevin was saying, you're creating the environment, almost an ideal environment. But if they talk to their architect at the design stage, there are really simple things that you can put into a home to future-proof it, right?
So Saleem's got this brilliant product which basically cuts out half of this process of trying to find your plot of land and trying to kind of come up with visionary ideas about what to do. So Saleem, do you want to kind of talk through?
We can go one step behind if you want. You can go back to
in 6 clicks. You can have a house.
Can you go back a couple of slides, please? Yeah, the
one?
one with the diagram. Yeah, go back. Yeah, that one.
Okay.
To follow up on your well-being starts, as we were talking with Kevin the other day on Friday, and he asked me, is there a hierarchy in addressing any project from that perspective, as well-being is a buzzword these days and everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon. But honestly, it is actually a mindset, as we discussed the other day. Well-being starts with a mindset. Am I really interested in well-being? Is it really for me? Am I interested in introducing it to my life? And well-being is not just about systems, whether they are hard systems or soft systems. It starts with the way of thinking. It starts with considering that glass of water, whether it's half full or half empty. It starts with a positive outlook, like Tony was saying, the grand designer. But it also, from a practical point of view, so it starts with a way of thinking, then it goes into theoretical point of view, and then it goes into a practical point of view. So introducing your vision, what is it about, how well-being can be introduced into your project, and then how that will influence your project brief. I mean, the project brief is as good as the architect is as good as the project brief that they are given. So it really starts with the way of thinking and then gearing it down.
Yeah. And Lucy, I mean, we're an aging population. We're going to be living longer to be older. So this is really important, isn't it, that we make sure that our homes are suitable for us as we get older and older.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, lots of people don't want to think about the fact they're getting older, but a lot of the things you need when you're old are similar to things you need when you're young. And I think Johnny and Cara's is a good example, because in their kitchen, she needed a dual height worktop so that her husband could chop and so could she, but it also meant that her kids can get more involved in day-to-day stuff. So it meant the kids were getting involved in all the meal prep, and I don't know if that was necessarily a thought that she had when she wanted to do that, but it just meant that everyone was more included because you're just offering more variation. And one thing that will happen to everyone is that you will grow through stages of life. You may never have something like what happened to Cara happened to you, but if you've had a baby, they will turn into a toddler and they will turn into a stroppy teenager. And designing your home with all of those people in mind, so you're sort of designing for 5 different people rather than just the baby that you've got at the moment, just means that whatever you're putting in will just stay and can adapt to that growing
and
human.
it saves money by doing that.
Exactly. And it's just a bit of extra thought at the beginning of the process that pays off in the long run massively.
For that, while we're on the subject of that film, we made a visit to a Yorkshire supplier in Hull of disability access equipment, the kind of usual thing, lots of plastic and various mobility aids and so forth. And it was the standard offering, and it was to explore what the standard offering was, the bolt-on offering. And but I want to come back to a point you've just made and Saleem's just made, and it's this idea about the brief. It's about the idea of what you want. And if you have the chance to build or the chance to remodel a home, then you have that opportunity to dream. And
Yes.
most of what I'm saying is that most of what's available in the market is a sort of corrective
Yeah.
attempt at trying to provide some help so that you can kind of have a little bit more freedom and melody and movement and enjoy more access. But actually, when you dream, then you can go somewhere else with it. And there was one thing in Kara's house which completely blew me away, and it was my experience of walking into her bedroom, and she was waiting in the room, and they deliberately waited. And no, but we hadn't talked about this part of the building at all beforehand. And I walked in, and she was sitting on a low windowsill. It was a windowsill which was also a window seat, and it was a big window, and it looked out from her bedroom across the valley. And I remember having made great play of the fact that when she was in bed at the other side of the room, she would have been able to see out of this window across the valley.
Yeah.
But this was the first time in 2.5 years of knowing her that I saw her sitting on a window seat, not in her wheelchair.
I've got the clip.
You got a clip. It was astonishing. It was. I get quite emotional thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because this is her and Johnny discussing with their architect early doors what the experiences she wanted. And she wanted not to be in her wheelchair, not to be in bed. She wanted to be able to sit with him together in this window seat. And she could access it from her wheelchair really easily. She could slide across. It was all built. And that you can't buy in a shop, and that you can't get unless you think about it early doors.
But on your point, she couldn't have thought about those things if she hadn't have had her experience.
No.
Which is why we're kind of trying to put people through simulation experiences, both homeowners and architects, with helping them to kind of lean into that idea about what happens if you have a physical difficulty, because you don't know what you don't know. So therefore you can't think about the design process. Just this is sort of Saleem's just 6 clicks. In 6 clicks, you can, choose your location.
Oh, 6 clicks. I mean, it's slightly off course, but 6 clicks is meant to help self-builders or self-build enthusiasts to find a plot of land, to assess that plot of land, to visualize it, to come up with a floor plan, and then it helps them find the local architect, the local contractor. It's just a tool to accelerate people towards self-build.
Yeah.
I mean...
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant idea. Do we want to see Kara's and Johnny's kind of what their plan was for their house, so you can see?
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
Set on the site of the old stable
I could talk you through it, but I already am.
Perfectly level groundworks platform has already been built up at the front and cut into the hill at the back, beneath a long stone retaining wall. Structurally insulated timber panels will form the walls, and 5 laminated timber beams will allow the interior to be open, tall, and large. Wide accessible doorways will lead you across flat floors to an open living room with views across the valley, and a dramatic roof light atop an audacious pyramid. The tall kitchen will have one wall clad in local reclaimed bricks, and the aim is to incorporate accessibility into the design. Any mobility aids will be super subtle. The floors will be ultra-flat and threshold-free for wheelchair access between the 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a therapy room, and a small office, which will give onto a sheltered courtyard at the back. All these spaces have to be accessible, practical, and beautiful.
I mean, you get the idea. So
Yeah, I do.
basically, she was adamant that she didn't want to have it looking accessible, didn't she?
Well, I think the point that Kevin made earlier is just watching that. I'm not thinking, oh, this looks like a it just looks beautiful.
Yeah.
And all of the sort of interventions there, the architectural interventions, are things that you would like, whether you're able-bodied or not, or whatever the situation is.
Yeah, no, it's my point is that great ability architecture is just great architecture, and what you're doing is you're allowing for flexibility in your own life. Thresholds of any kind are problematic for anybody of any age.
Absolutely.
I've tripped over.
Yeah.
I've tripped over the threshold going into my downstairs loo. Yeah, really annoying.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that pretty well every home I've visited or been involved with that has this in mind. That is, if you like, it's wise design. It has foresight. It's generally good for human beings to have threshold-free spaces, to have a fluidity of approach through a building, to have wide doorways, to have closures which don't trap your fingers, to have things which are easy to open and shut. I mean, it's the everyday. It's good stuff.
Exactly. And I remember when I was kind of studying for this, I heard a human rights lawyer that said, when you design for every ability, you create better design. And that's so true, I think. If you look at some of the stuff that she included in her house, there are just thoughtful things in there, detailing that makes, she calls this her whole way of happiness, which is, it's just wide, it's beautiful, it's lovely. This is her bathroom. It doesn't look like an accessible bathroom. That sink basically allows her to get her wheelchair underneath it. And I think...
And how much of this is about just systems in construction that we have? We just have these rules worktops are at heights. You'll go to a builder and they'll say, your worktop has to be this height. And there's no real reason for that. It can be lower. The doorways with a certain height, width, but they can be wider. Why
don't they?
Yeah.
Well, it's usually money is a pretty big driver here,
exactly.
of course. And I don't mean that it's expensive to do it well. What I mean is that a 70 centimeter door is a lot cheaper than a 90 centimeter door.
Yeah.
And I think that sink, for example, a little harder to find because it's shallow, but not that hard to find in order to be able to get the wheelchair underneath. So there's a degree to which you have to work harder. And I think in terms of making up thresholds, that's a big problem for most builders because it involves some really quite complex, detailed adding up.
Yeah.
So your makeup of your floor in your sitting room is going to be different to that, for example, maybe in the kitchen for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Different to that outside where, you're dealing with a different set of components. You just have to add it all up and make sure that you're going to finish at the same point. I mean, it's not something that architects are very good at doing, is actually calculating that through, as opposed to many people and many self-builders are guilty of this, of kind of making it up as they go along. I would start with a slab here and it'll work itself out. It doesn't. You have to work back from the absolutely finished surface to ensure you're going to get that threshold-free zone and have your door suppliers working with you on the thresholds of the external doors and making sure again that you can get a free and easy movement across those thresholds.
If you don't get that in at the design stage, that's it. So all the decisions need to be made really up front.
Just think it through and be diligent and work with an architect who's going to deliver you that. It's very simple.
There's lots of things that we will think about that won't necessarily cross your mind, exactly like the level thresholds. If you want a 20 mil garden patio, but your kitchen tile's only 5 mil and you don't think about that in advance, it's not going to be level when you go in. So that's just one example of many that...
And if you decide at the last minute to change your kitchen tile to a laminated timber underfloor heated, whatever, then you've thrown it. So you've really got to commit early doors, haven't you, to what you're going to be doing.
See it as the whole.
The problem a lot of the time with the process, having kind of studied the process, is that no one gives you the right information at the right time, which is why we're set up to signpost to, thoughtful designers and products that will help you.
But as Kevin says, and that's why you work with an architect, because they will think of all of those things on your behalf.
But not every architect will do that, though.
Sorry?
In my experience, not every architect will do that for you.
Yeah.
You have to have the right ones who've either had the experience or
Yeah.
who are thoughtful enough, like Lucy, like Saleem, who think about well-being
Yeah.
as part
Yeah.
and parcel of their process.
I mean, if you're going to put a soundproof door in,
Yeah.
the door makeup, the door width, door frame, the wall thickness are all going to be affected.
Yeah.
If you want to put in as you say, we said a flush threshold onto a patio, you have to analyze and specify every material and take into account every adhesive, every layer, every membrane, and have work back until you get to basically the rock of the ground. And you need to be back into the earth and be confident that what you're going to be able to build is going to match what is specified. So there has to be much greater work, greater quantity of work up front, because you often the contractor will be involved, or a soil engineer might be involved, just so that you can get that threshold. A garden designer will be involved, just so that you can get that threshold.
Yeah.
But hence, this is what the design process actually is. Though it's this ordering and researching and streamlining and refining to get to that point where what you build is what you've planned as much as possible.
I got someone to come to me earlier today. They had a plan. They're building a house in Greece. And then they came up, put the floor plan, beautiful rendering on the outside. And then they said, well, the downstairs, because it's a hill, we've sorted out the first floor, and then the basement, which is giving onto the garden. So we've got some bedrooms in the background, but we've got that space in the front and then fronting the garden. We don't know what to do with it. And then you got these 3 bedrooms just giving onto the hallway, right, and onto that big space. And I said to her, okay, I mean, I don't know anything about you. I'm going to try and help you here. But the first thing that I see is you have no privacy for the bedrooms, because there's no sus, or there's no lobby between it and the hall and the big hall. And so that's the acoustic problem. And then you've got no privacy. You open that door into that hall and you want to entertain, and somebody's sleeping in there, they can't. So people may have started with someone to design it for them, and then they come back like, oh, we're in the middle of the build, and we're now not sure what we're going to do with it. And then they come to completely someone else, and then they want them to solve the problem. But I said, you need to really engage an interior designer or someone to visualize that space from 2D onto 3D, and then discuss with you what the brief of that space is, what you want to do with it, how would it affect everybody around it. Will that person sleeping in that room be comfortable with you entertaining out on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening? So all of these, they should be part of a design process, which we should...
Yeah.
It's a really, really interesting point. And we spend a lot of time on the program discussing how we're going to try and convey not the look of a building, but the experience of a building. What's it like to walk through? I mean, we're all guilty of this. We see a bath for sale and it's on offer. It's got 80% off and it's on this online supply company. It's exactly the shape and look that we want. And it's not steel, it's acrylic, but do we try and get it? Do we actually order it? Do we go to a showroom and sit in it to try and find out? No, we don't. We just order it and then, it's 8 centimeters too tall. I can't get into it. I need to build a plinth. And we imagine ourselves looking at spaces like we look at catalogs and look at stands and look at photographs in magazines. We imagine we want the look. Goodness me, every other magazine article is called Get the Look.
Yeah.
And actually, architecture, buildings are experiential. They happen in 4 dimensions. They happen in time and in the 3 dimensions of moving. And often it involves a little bit of pain, a knock here and there, or actually, alternatively, maybe an extraordinarily comfortable experience. That light switch may look fabulous, but it can be sharp-edged. That door handle, if you're slightly arthritic, as I am, can look exquisite, but it can be painful to open the door. The action on that spring can be really rather sharp. And we don't think about the experience. We never contemplate what will it be like to use and to enjoy, and how can that component of that building bring us joy and pleasure as opposed to pain and difficulty. And so often our homes actually, and the stuff we buy, it does the latter. It looks great, and we're prepared to sacrifice the pain and the lack of pleasure for the look. But it's really not what design is about.
Yeah, I was saying to Karen earlier, yeah, it's the look, but it's also the experience. And with my practice at the beginning of the process, we send out quite an invasive questionnaire for people, and we ask them what their morning routine is, where do they make their cup of coffee? Do they have tea in the morning or do they have coffee in the morning? Because all of those tiny little behaviours affect where the kettle's going, or if you're having a hot tap, or if you've got a full coffee set up and you need to be able to scrape the grinds into the bin. So all of it just comes back to thought and being thoughtful as early as possible in the process, so that you can think about these tiny little behaviours that you wouldn't necessarily think affect where your bin's going in your kitchen, but will make your day feel so much more seamless. And like we said earlier, if it's easier for someone in a wheelchair, it will be easier for everyone else as well.
Yeah.
So it's not just, improving the experience for one person. It is actually probably going to make it much better.
Because in the end, that will make the difference between somebody's house being a haven or a prison. And I think Cara, I don't know if this is it actually. Yeah, I think it is. This is what you were talking
Here she
about.
is, yeah.
That I can do
Don't know if you
all
can
the things that I've been longing to do. I don't feel trapped. Me and Johnny have tried to show that just by thinking a bit harder, you can make accessibility work. I wanted it all, and I've got it all and more, Kevin. Got it all and more, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that for her was the key, wasn't it? It was kind of like she wanted the beautiful space, but she didn't want to kind of, she needed it to function. And that window ledge, like you were talking about, that was a core detail.
Well, you
in the
can see
design.
it's a few
Wide
inches
enough.
lower than the one on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
It's a simple decision to
Yeah.
make a window
Yeah.
a little bigger
But
and
you
a little
can,
lower.
That's
So
about 40, 45 centimeters.
Yeah,
from,
so she can slide.
yeah.
Yeah.
She can slide sideways from her wheelchair, drop the arm, slide onto it, slide back.
Yeah.
Doesn't require anybody to help her do that. But
Yeah.
for that moment, for that glorious moment, she's out of the wheelchair
yeah, absolutely.
and on level terms
Yeah,
with
and not
anybody who
impressive.
joins her for a conversation.
You know,
It's
and
just-
if you're temporarily or permanently in that space, you suddenly start to get
Yeah.
it. But on your point, Lucy, it's that whole thing of like, you can think about the coffees and the teas and everything, but you won't necessarily anticipate what might happen if,
Yeah.
and that's what that thoughtful design bit is all about. And
The funny thing is, nearly all of us have a family member
Yeah,
or a friend
absolutely.
who is
absolutely, yeah,
either bedbound or in a wheelchair
Yeah.
or has to use a frame or is blind or has difficulty hearing or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And those of us who have very elderly relatives, you'll be aware of the difficulties that presents with them and the way in which with the onset of age and all its accoutrements, the individual becomes almost taken away from you, swallowed up, and they feel swallowed up and made more
Yes.
remote
yes.
by the difficulties they have in interacting with the world because they can't hear
And the rest of the people in
or
the
can't see
space, yeah, exactly.
or can't
exactly.
move.
Yeah,
And so the interesting thing for me is that designing and future-proofing in this way for human beings allows people not just to be comfortable and to live longer, it allows them to be truly human longer and interact and relate to other human beings. We all have the same problem in the back of our minds about
yeah.
being faced in a situation where suddenly we're dealing with somebody in a wheelchair and you're trying to calculate what it is that has brought them to that place. And what do I do? Am I meant to offer to help to push?
Well,
Do I-
exactly.
And there's an uncomfortableness in that encounter. And the wheelchair, in a way, gets in the way of an ordinary human encounter. And when I first met Cara, same thing. She's amazing at actually propelling us, at getting around and doing whatever she needs to do. But that moment when she is on the window ledge, suddenly there was
No barrier.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the Germans talk about barrier-free design. They've got it all right.
barrier-free.
Yeah. And that's
great,
what
yeah.
this is all about. And then, the problems that, somebody with arthritic hands might have with their dexterity are similar to a 5-year-old. So I just wanted to quickly flick through. I don't know how much time we've got.
You've got 4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay. So we're going to have to quickly.
can't.
Oh, that's what I was going to say about the simulation experience. So basically, we will put, if you wanted to, you can kind of go through this experience where we'll put, this is what Max did, went through this sort of simulation experience of testing out spaces that, the bath that you've always dreamed of. Can you actually get into it? No, you can't. Can you twist a tap that's shaped like that? No, you can't. With that kind of simulation experience, you can design better. If you're doing it yourself and you're doing the design process where you've recruited an architect, you can kind of, help. So even getting off a toilet, so basically they give comfort height loos to people who are older or who've kind of had an accident. I think we should all have comfort height loos.
Yeah.
We're all taller, It's ridiculous.
Oh, I tell you what, let's just run through because you must have are you prepared to talk about this? Do you have a personal issue with something? You're wearing glasses for a start.
I am blind.
Well, there you
yes.
go.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
So we all of us,
Need
I look around the
these.
room, there are people wearing
Yeah.
glasses, people wearing contact lenses.
So if we kept our hands up, how many people have got kids? Right, so 5-year-olds have dexterity problems. How many people have had a sports injury? Keep your hands up. Sports injury, back injury. Keep your hands up, keep your hands up. Everybody, okay, back injury. Yeah, okay. Who's got older relatives? Okay, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. So basically every single person who's thinking about designing or renovating their home needs to include all of those people. And you can't do it unless you think about thoughtful design.
How many people wearing hearing aids in the room? Anybody wearing hearing aids?
Yeah, they're okay, yeah. Yeah. Vision,
Anybody anybody got high blood pressure?
Yeah.
Taking statins, maybe? Yeah.
Anyone-
We know where that leads.
Yeah.
So, there's all kinds of incipient problems. And if you only look at your own health records, if you only look at your own sports records, if you suffer with pain
Yeah.
in a limb or a joint, that's not going, I can tell you, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. You're going to get further inflammation, maybe a bit of local arthritis on that joint. So by the time you're 65, you won't be able to open a bottle of beer or a bottle of water, or worse still, a bottle of wine. And you're going to need aids and help. And before you know it, your kitchen and your bathroom starts looking like some kind of medical laboratory because it's got all this stuff in it to try and help you. And actually, we can plan and prevent so much of that by just designing properly.
Well, just to say very quickly, I've created a 3D model, which is on our site. Basically, you can explore each different space, that it gives you the advice that an occupational therapist would give you, but you only get that if there's something wrong or there's a crisis. So it'll give you the measurements, the key items that you need, the installer instructions that often get missed, and the key heights for putting loos in and rail systems in, and then basically wanted to flick through so I can get to Lucy's bit of thoughtfully designed kitchens and spaces. So this kitchen has won an award from us because of things, clever detail, like you don't have to climb up onto a work surface to go and get something out of a top shelf. It's got heat-proof oven thing. So basically you don't have to carry, heavy things into in the kitchen. Rise and fall worktops. Basically, if you're tall chef or a small chef, you can kind of get it to your right height, or you can just do it by having dual heights, like Lucy said. This is a clever idea. Waterfall edges. So basically, if you're in a wheelchair, you probably won't feel in your legs. If you get a hot spill onto your legs, that's going to cause a burn or a scald. Anyway, it's good design because it stops things getting messy on the floor.
I mean, it's just a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Full stop.
Yeah.
For anybody, anywhere.
Bathrooms. What's new in bathrooms? Barbie.
Ooh.
Barbie has come to accessible bathrooms. So basically, clever design details like this sink, the seat, those kinds of things just make that space easier to use. Barbie may not be your taste, but you can have something like this. So basically, if you look there at that spot, see the by the loo, that rail can hook on and hook off, so that if you don't want that in your space, you don't have to have it. If somebody comes to stay, you can seamlessly put it on.
Well, there are one or two bathroom companies now, aren't they, now selling you basically a kind of what looks like a towel rail, and it sort of is,
Yes,
but it's got a reinforced
exactly.
fixing, so it allows you
Exactly.
to take a load and be used as a
Exactly.
grab rail. Yeah.
So these bathroom packs we've designed with the designers to kind of allow the bathroom space to adapt to people's needs as they change over time. And then bedrooms, Lucy.
Should I do
So this
very
is
quickly?
something, a lovely,
So this is just a quick example of one of the projects we did where it was a bedroom for a 1-year-old, but they were planning on staying there for many years. So we kind of had the two fixed bits of joinery in the side, and then the bit in the middle was the bit that changed. So it was
see that?
basically just a movable section that you could slide up and down. So it started off as a changing table, then you'd slide out and move it down as a low desk for a 2-year-old, and then it might go up a bit and become a dressing table for a 12-year-old.
brilliant.
And everything else was fixed and didn't change. So rather than having to redo the whole room every 2 years when you've got a totally different human in your house, we just had that one element that flexed for the different stages of the kid's life.
And it's things like that that will just make the difference between having to rip out and start again. Oftentimes people who are sort of in their 50s will think, oh, that's brilliant, I can now design this dream space, and isn't it wonderful? But at that stage, they're not thinking about, you know, what next, or who I might be looking after, or whatever. It's and they could be they could be grandchildren as much as they could be your mum or dad. So basically, it's making spaces kind of able to adapt to people's needs as they change over time with thoughtful design.
Fantastic. And I think that's a great way to end. Thoughts.
Exactly.
Think about the future in your design. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause, please. Thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.